Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, August 5th. Happy August. First critique of the week of August. We are not streaming on Twitter today. When I went to log into the Twitter studio, it no longer exists. Now it is Twitter Create. And fuel your next culture-shaping idea through art and science using Twitter. Start with goals, industries, or our extensive product list. And then it's just all different. And I had 3 minutes. And I couldn't find where the where the streaming is. So we're not on Twitter today, but we don't use Twitter much anyway. But I'm glad to see you all here. Let's see who we got. We got Colette O'Donohue. We got Ethne. Good to see you. Dick Westheimer's here. Liska, Vina Kumar. This is over on YouTube, by the way. We got James Langford. We got Cindy Buchanan. We got D. Coleman and Terry R. and Clayton Clark. Good to see everybody. Make sure Facebook is working too. We got Mark Grenier over there and Joe Barca and Sharon Ferrante. Katie Dozier Moshman. Good to see you too. Let's see. Okay. So at the end of this critique of the week, you might think that I planned things out or something. I on a whim said I would critique one of my own poems just because I thought that would be weird, and I try to keep things a little different. So I did print out 2 poems that I think didn't work that I wrote, and we'll see how those go. I probably just read one of them, but we have 2 other great poets here. It's Allison Shoemaker, and then we have poems by Greg Budig as well. So we got 3 poems by them, and then to fill out the last end of the hour, we will try one of my own poems, and I can tear myself apart. So how you see? Because there's some poems that I want to work and don't. So before I was trying to fix Twitter and figure out how that works, I was looking for some poems really quick to see what I might print out. So I got that too, and the printer's still running and hot. So if you hear a weird clicking in the background, that's it shutting off in a second. But anyway, the goal of the critique of the week, as always, is to give that workshop experience to everybody. We sit around and we share poems and talk about how to make them better. And so let us know what you like, what you didn't in the comments. The authors can read these here, so they can learn a lot from the process. It's really hard to know what strangers think about your poems. And this is a way to let them know. So let's all get around and get started. Here we go with the first poet today. Allison Shoemaker has 2 poems for us. So here's the first. This is The Trouble with Baths. The trouble with baths is that the door can be shut and the lights dimmed and the candles burning, and you're a lobster in a pot with a faint scent of lavender and bergamot. I'm not sure what that is, bergamot. Tasty botanicals, and all is dim and quiet and covered in bubbles, and your clothes puddle on the floor next to your woe-begotten paperback, and you drown your ears in soft sounds, and your body in its broth, and you close your eyes and breathe deep, and you and the water and the money and the time and the aromas, you're all mashed together and sweaty at the end of the day. All membranes are permeable. So an interesting poem here. It's a prose poem with a kind of one-liner at the end, which my first... and Jenny Middleton says bergamot is a scented herb. Yeah, that's what I figured in context. I just never heard it before. But cool, you learn something every day. I will Google that afterward and see what it... every time you hear something that is a scent that you don't know, I really want to smell it, but there's no smell-o-vision on the internet, which is unfortunate. But anyway, The Trouble with Baths. And this is like I was saying, there's a prose poem with a one line at the end. And the first immediately thing I wanted to do was make it a haibin. Because haibin is prose, and it's a perfect set for a haibin. And I kind of thought it was going to be too, because out of the corner of your eye, you see the shape of the poem, even if you're not looking at it ahead of time. And it's got the paragraph, and it's got the one line. So I thought this might be a one-line haiku. But it's really a statement at the end. And the main thing I would love to do is just fix this ending and just make the ending more interesting. Joe Barca says the same thing. Great images, well written, but I was waiting for a turn. Exactly. And Kashiana's saying Haibin is where I went to. Yeah, and so in that turn that Joe Barca suggests is what is what the haiku at the end of a haiga adds. So if you don't know what a haiga is, if you're new to that concept, it's an old Japanese tradition, coming I think from diaries, and the idea of just people writing in diaries, and they would write out prose descriptions of their day or a trip they went on, and they would insert haiku in the diary. And then they ended up being, if I'm getting this wrong, somebody can correct me. But and then they started, publishing that together with the haiku that they included with the journalistic entry. And then that it sort of expanded into a whole style. And what you want to do is write write sort of a, compelling prose about something, whatever it is. We've published a ton of Hybens in Rattle. We talked on episode, I don't know, like maybe 120 or so with Roberta Beery, who's the Hyben editor for Modern Haiku magazine, and she writes a lot of Hyben, so you can check that episode out too. But what it does is it gives it that automatic turn. It makes it so that, because the haiku at the end undercuts and sort of changes and adds a whole new layer of meaning. So what you wanted to do with that form, you would write, and this is just wonderful prose, actually. I haven't mentioned it yet, but this is very engaging. I love the rhythms of it, and it really pulls you into that bath. So that was really cool. And then what the haiku would do at the end is undercut and do something different. So it would say something completely on the surface, maybe unrelated to what you just read, but on a deeper level related. That's kind of what you're looking for. And then that adds this whole, the major thing in a haiku is the cut. The kuriji, they'd call it. And that's where the haiku changes from kind of one world to another. Like, and it's, so there's this like parallel overlap, and that's what a Hyben does on the same level, on a bigger level, because it's the whole poem that's doing that. So anyway, what you'd want to do is make something surprising here. And all membranes are permeable kind of does that. But it does it because it's just one statement instead of two. It does it in a kind of flat way, where I think it could grow and make the poem a lot stronger if you just added something more, extended this a little bit, so this had some movement in it too, instead of just being one level. If that makes sense. Hopefully I'm explaining that right. But that was my first impression reading this poem, was it would make a great Hyben. And it's close. It just needs a good haiku at the end instead of like a sort of a, it's a one space instead of a two, if that makes sense. So, but anyway, let's look at a little line by line though. The Trouble with Baths is the title. I like that title. It sets the poem up pretty well. We kind of know where we are. We're gonna be talking about baths, but there's a trouble with it. So there's sort of a controversy or whatever, a little schism at the end. So we know there's going to be some kind of, whatever the word is I'm looking for, conflict. That is the word. There's going to be some kind of conflict. It's the trouble with bath. It's not just bath. So we already have that sense that something is going to happen here. Is that the door, the trouble? So we read into the title. So the trouble with baths is that the door can be shut and the lights dimmed and the candles burning and you're a lobster in a pot with a faint scent of lavender and bergamot. So it's just great description, and the way it runs, there's a great rhythm to it too. Is that the door can be shut and the lights dimmed and the candles burning and you're a lobster in a pot with a faint scent of lavender and bergamot. And notice how that is about as long as I can last without a breath. So it's done really nicely too, without any pauses there. I'm running out of air in my lungs as I'm reading that when I get to bergamot, and then it gives you a pause right at the time. You get to take a little breath, read to get to tasty botanicals right when you need a pause. So it's a nice, it just feels nice rhythmically reading it. And all is dim and quiet and covered in bubbles, and your clothes puddle on the floor next to your woe-begotten paperback, and you drown your ears in soft sounds. So you had to breathe air. And your body in its broth, and you close your eyes and breathe deep, and you and the water and the money and the time and the aromas, you're all smashed together and sweat. And at the end of the day, and now it has all membranes are permeable, which is an interesting concept. I do like the idea of, sort of being one. I like what it's going for here. Yeah. Katie Dozier says the sounds are so great. Yeah, they are. And I don't know. It's just this ending I think it's great, except for this ending needs to do more. The idea that we're all permeable, and there's sort of a metaphor in that, because it's like all of life kind of gets into our life, like even the walls in the room, if we want to block things out, we can't, but also all the botanicals and things are like soaking through our skin and into our cells, is because everything is permeable. And so there's a good concept there, but it doesn't have like the kick that you want. And the kick would be to make this almost like its own poem. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I think you want to think about this last line instead of just a last line as a separate poem. Even if you don't go the haiku route, if this were like a tiny poem where it had some sense of movement within this line, where this was expanded just a little bit and a little more surprising once you present it, I think that would work really well. Let's see. So Mark Grenier mentions the lobster image suggests something that doesn't fit in the rest of the poem well. And yeah, that was something I thought of too. So thanks for pointing that out. Jane French says the dog jumps in the tub. That's funny. Yeah, but yeah, the lobster image, I don't know, because it's the trouble with baths. Maybe that's something that could be developed more in this ending that we're not feeling like has enough of a turn, enough of a surprise. Because we have the trouble with baths, and then we get like a lobster, which is definitely something like a negative connotation. Like that's a trouble. If you're a lobster, you're kind of in trouble. If you're not in the ocean. So so that kind of fits, but it doesn't really come back in a way that makes sense. So maybe the real key to getting the turn that's missing at the end of this poem is to get the trouble that comes with the trouble at the beginning and the lobster later, wherever that went. Yeah, they're a lobster. And then get that trouble into the ending too. And maybe that's the thing that we're missing. Katie wants to add butter to the lobster. Let's see. Terry R says, I like the clothes and the puddle, but it seemed a bit out of sequence, being in the present tense. Would clothes puddled on the floor be better? I don't know. The tense didn't stand out to me, but let's see. Maybe if there's some tense issues. So the trouble is this, and the candles are burning, and you're a lobster in a pot, and blah, blah, blah. Your clothes puddle on the floor. See, I thought, it's still present tense. Your clothes puddle on the floor. It's verb, making a verb out of puddle, which I liked. Woebegone paperback. Yeah, and someone pointed out on Facebook that woebegone was a good word in a poem. It's a rarely used. I like that too. And you drown your ears in soft sounds, and your body is in its broth. Yeah. So I don't know. You might not like haiku and might want to put a haiku at the end, but just it needs one more step. That's all. I think it's a good poem. Otherwise, I like it a lot. And I think the step can have to do with the trouble a little bit in the lobster and kind of resolve that, which is left hanging, I think. Audrey Friedman says, in Haibin, the haiku should not be obviously related. Yeah, I'm not sure if I made that clear enough. Like, it's something that should be, different until you, think about it, There should be some kind of leap, I guess is the best way to think of it. It shouldn't be just a continuation of the prose. It should be something that's on the surface at least completely different. And then the sort of the pleasure, the strangeness of it, the expansion of your mind comes from thinking about how to link the two. It's almost like a like a Zen type thing or koan. How does this fit? And then that's what expands and pushes your consciousness into a richer view of the world, which is what we want to do with poems. So that's what you want to do in the end. And I think it was trying to do this, I think. Because talking about membranes and permeability is completely different than this. I think it just needs to be expanded a little more and a little more interesting. Oh, so this is what Terry R. said. So I guess that makes sense. You're right. So Terry R. talking about the bath and the puddles is the sequence of it, not the tense. So puddle is like an active verb, which is true, yeah. And so then it would be puddling right now in the present tense. But you're already in the bath with the botanicals. You're a lobster, you're already in the pot. So your clothes have already puddled on the floor. So it needs to be past tense there. Yeah, you're right. Good point. Good point there, Terry. So I think this should be puddled on the floor. Just because we're listing a sequence of events. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, just something more interesting here. I think it's a really good poem, though. Let's see. Do we have any other comments to pass on? And Vina Kumar here says, the door is closed, but everything still seeps in, can't escape ourselves. Yeah, that's what this ending implies. And that's why I think the poem works. And that's the trouble. I think the trouble is that everything's still permeable. Even if you try to like build up these walls and have your sanctuary in the bathroom, or you're having a beautiful botanical bath, everything is still creeping in anyway. And it's really hard to, you can't really free yourself and put up a wall that's not permeable. So I think that makes a lot of sense. What it just needs is something extra, a little extra push here. And it's a hard thing to do in a critique, because you can't sort of generate lines for people. But let's see. Audrey Friedman too suggests contemporary Hyben online is next in journal. I'm not familiar with that. So, and up ahead, I missed this too. Dick Westheimer said, could you comment on the chain of ands and how that works for you? I kind of like it. I mean, it adds to the rhythm. It always feels a little biblical to me, because that's one of the King James Bible does a lot of that. And I don't know. I think it adds to the rhythm and keeps the poem kind of pushing forward. It is one of those things that some people find irritating, I think. I don't know if Dick is sort of in that camp suggested by that, but it's something I kind of like, and I tend to do sometimes myself. Actually, in my book, one of the only edits, I can't remember which poem. It would take me too long to find it. But Kate Gale, who was on the Rattlecast 2 a couple this spring, she was the editor. I think one of her only edits, maybe the only edit, was that I did that too much in one poem, and she took off. Maybe I could find it. This is like Tim Poem Day. But there was a poem in here. It's short. I'm remembering which one it is now. Yeah, it was this... how I'd explain it poem. And toward the end, I'd been like, the doe never bends toward the apple core who sent drew her. She waits in the warm clearing as if she knows what's coming. And sometimes I think maybe she does. I think that's what I had like 3 ands in there originally somehow. And Kate was like, no ands. There's too many ands. And I don't know. I agreed and didn't really care, I guess. But so that's one of the changes I made. And people just have a different sort of sense of that. There's some things that people, we all have little quirks and ticks, and sometimes things rub us the wrong way, and sometimes they don't. So that's what I think about the ands. Oh, and Dick Westerson says, no, I like it. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And Terry R says, I think it makes the ands make the reading breathless. And that's the effect. So I like that. I guess everybody here does too then. It can get to be too much, I guess, was the point I was trying to make. But I don't think it does here. I never got tired of it. I mean, what you don't want, maybe I should say, is to have, you never want to have the structure of the syntax, like the way the sentences, just syntactically, like this, the subject, object, verb, like the way the adjectives are arrayed, like the shape of the, is there another word for syntax? The shape of the syntax. You don't want that to be over and over again. You want sentences to vary in length, and the constructions of the sentences change, or else that part of your brain that listens for that, I think it's the Broca's area, gets bored, and you don't want to do that. You want to keep the whole brain engaged, and so you want to have variety. And I think when you have a lot of ands, sometimes it lends you toward using the same sentence structures over and over again, and that might be why people, when they're turned off, like maybe some people are more sensitive to that. I'm just thinking out loud though. I don't know. And Jimmy Papa says, and sometimes I use ampersands when I have a lot of ands like this. Yeah, that's a good idea too, to use ampersands. Anyway, I wish I had more of a critique of this poem, but all I want is I want this to be a Hyben, and that just means expanding this concept at the end a little bit. So read a bunch of Hyben on that contemporary, what was it? Contemporary Hyben online. Check that out. At Audrey Friedman's suggestion, and make this a Hyben. Experiment with that, and I think it'll open up the poem and make it really work. Okay, so let's look at Allison's other poem. This is Show 7, Field 10, or a brief note to former Doctor Who showrunner Stephen Moffat. It's too much. Stephen, may I call you Stephen, Mr. Moffat? You have all of time and space, a box infinite on the inside, full of nothing and intelligence and real and hypothetical cats. Ah, you said, contemplating the vastness before you. Here is plentiful room for orchestral swells so big one could ride them into the denouement. Here is room enough for endless variations of one woman, a lightning bolt shot through a photocopier. Here are monsters and maidens, and here too is Gillifrey on the lamb. But most of all, for all you said that I am feeling. Here it comes, and you made an airplane sound, and you filled the box with the heart of unknowable you. I hope it made room behind your ribs. I hope it sings through your blood like the ood rejoicing. I hope it pleases you. One problem, Mr. Moffat, all that room, and you've left no space for me. That's interesting. So this poem, just my general sense, first of all, I just don't feel like I know what is actually going on. It feels a little too personal, actually, even though it's directed to a showrunner for Doctor who you kind of have to assume that this was a response to watching an episode show 7, field 10, whatever that means. So you kind of assume that it's not a personal relationship, but it feels very personal in a way that I'm not sure if I can connect the dots for. So I think I need a little more information about what... I just don't know what the end means. You left no space for me. I'm just a little confused by that. But I love the sounds and descriptions that move through. There's some great lines here. One thing I think, I read this right before we went live on air and figured it out, but it took me like 3 times to realize, 3 times, I tripped over this title because I think that Doctor Who really needs to be italicized or underlined or bolded or some kind of thing to know. Because if it's just written like this, I read it as a brief note to a former doctor who's showrunner. It didn't make sense. And I didn't realize, oh, that's Doctor Who. So I think you need to italicize this. But until that sets up the poem. Show 7, field 10. I believe that must be. I don't know. Is that a thing people actually use, or is that something unique to Doctor Who? The 10th beat of the show of show 10. Terry R didn't get it was Doctor Who either. It's hard to read unless you know that that's a title. And I don't think I've ever seen Doctor Who myself. It's comma. Do you need a comma after? I don't think you do need a comma after showrunner. Would that help the reading of it though? I don't know. I mean, the main thing is it just needs to be italicized, so you know that the who isn't part of the showrunner. Because I was expecting who showruns, to the former Doctor who showruns or something. Anyway, just italicize that. And Jimmy Papa says no comma after or. And I think though the comma there is right, at least in what is that Vonnegut novel I'm thinking of? One of the Vonnegut novels has a short title and then a long title. I think it formats it like that though. It's like goodbye. I can't remember to type it up. But I think they put the comma there. And if Kurt Vonnegut does it and his publisher does it, then we can do it too. What is it? Which one? Mother Night, Hocus Pocus. I can't remember what I'm thinking of. Oh, it's Breakfast of Champions. That's right, the Breakfast of Champions. Here, I'll put it on the screen. This is oops, we don't have the screen up yet. Breakfast of Champions. It was going to be just Breakfast of Champions. And then the cereal company tried to sue him for not to keep him from using that because it was a trademark. And so he also made Or Goodbye Blue Monday, but they got oh no, they don't. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. I swear I've seen it in that construction though, where you have, usually it would be a semicolon here though instead. I swear I've seen that construction and a title where it's like something semicolon or comma block. And I think because it's to separate the or, because it's like when you have 2 alternate titles, and it sort of makes you know that the or is not really part of it. I don't know. I swear I've seen that before in this structure, but maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. But thanks for pointing that out, Jimmy. Anyway, let's dive into this poem a little bit more closely. It's too much, Stephen. May I call you Stephen? So I think what I'm assuming here is that the feeling of the show is too much, but I don't know what the show is. And maybe if it's are Doctor Who fans aware enough of like the show sequence to know what show 7 would be, so they could follow along and know what that's referring to. And then are there enough Doctor Who fans who would appreciate a poem so you don't need to do the reference? I'm not sure. It's an open question, but probably I think we need more explanation of what's actually going on somehow. But it's too much. I'm not sure if I like the too much. I think that might be too much. No pun intended. It's too much, Stephen. May I call you Stephen? She doesn't know, or the speaker doesn't know who Stephen, doesn't know Stephen personally, even though it ends up being kind of feeling personal toward the end. Like they both know what you're talking about. That's what I mean by personal too in a poem, by the way, is that the person that's being addressed, that the poem's written for, already knows the situation. That's when a poem feels too personal to me, because we don't know the situation, so we need to be helped, and we need to have the situation explained to us. But a personal poem doesn't need to have the situation explained, and it feels like Stephen knows what this is all about, but we don't. I think that's what's missing in the poem to me. But Mr. Moffat, you have all the time all of time and space, a box infinite on the inside. I like that. I don't know if that's part of the show, but I like that phrase. Full of nothing and intelligence and real and hypothetical cats. Ah, you said, contemplating the vastness before you, here is a plentiful room for orchestral swells so big one could ride them into denouement. That's just great. I love that phrase. And then this is even better. Here is room enough for endless variations of one woman, a lightning bolt shot through a photocopier. I love that too. That's great lines. Here are monsters and maidens, and here too is Gillifrey. I don't know who Gillifrey is, on the lamb. And so so this is different. I just point this out. Like, not being a Doctor Who fan or watcher whatsoever, I feel like I'm not included in the poem because I don't know what the episode is or what the situation is. But if I get to a name like this, I don't care. Like, I don't expect you to explain everybody to me. So I assume Gillifrey is some character on the show, and that's enough for me. Because if I want to know more about the show, Matthew King said it's Slaughterhouse 5 with a comma after the or. Thanks, Matthew. But then Breakfast of Champions doesn't have it, which is strange too. So I guess it's just up to you. But anyway, So great lines here. And here are monsters and maidens, and here too is Gillifrey on the lamb. Most of all, for all, you said. But most of all, for all, you said. See, that's another thing where it feels like an inside reference. But most of all, for all, you said. Like, I don't know what he said, or I guess it was Stephen Moffat, or put the words in the character's mouth or something. I don't know. That I'm feeling. Here it comes. You made an airplane sound and filled the box with the heart of unknowable you. So that's very interesting. I mean, that's another great line. I like that too. I hope it made room behind your ribs. I hope it sings through your blood like ood rejoicing. That's good descriptions and good sounds. I hope it pleases you. One problem, Mr. Moffat, all that room, and you've left no space for me. So Matthew King says Gillifrey is the Doctor's home planet. Yeah. Okay, so it actually makes the line more interesting. No, it's a planet, not a person. Okay, so Matthew King says, I've watched all 7 Moffat Doctor Who, not obsessively though, and I'm kind of lost in this poem too. Sidney Buchanan says, should Mr. Moffat's quotes and dialogue be in italics? Yeah, are there quotes in dialogue? I'm not sure. I think there might just be references to that. I have no idea. Somebody said, where was it? This is Handy Concept Arts, and since it's a handle, I'm not sure. This could be the author, but I don't know if it is. Allison Shoemaker, but it's just Handy Concept Arts, so probably not. Doctor Who has a room, a heart so huge that anything and everything can fit except the author. Although I don't know the show either, so some references are lost to me. Oh, okay, so it is definitely not Allison explaining. Yeah, well, I get that too. That's what the poem is saying. But the actual reference to what's going on, I'm very confused. I just feel lost in the poem. Like, I feel like I'm not let in. Like there's not enough of a door for me to enter it. It's like someone else's poem, you know. It doesn't feel like they're sharing the actual experience with me. And just because I don't really understand this, like here comes, where did it go? But most of all, for all you said that I am feeling, here it comes, and you made an airplane sound and filled the box with the heart of a knowable you. And so is that just a metaphor? I assume that's just a metaphor for what happened in this episode that make me feel left out. But we never get to know what it is, or yeah. I hope it made room behind your ribs. I hope it sings through your blood like the ood rejoicing. That's a great phrase. I hope it pleases you. But what is it? I mean, is it just that? Is it the episode? Is it the fact that she felt left out? Liska says maybe the author's speaker is part of a marginalized group that is never represented on the show. I don't know. It could be. We just don't know. And that's the kind of thing, like that explanation. Veena Kumar suggests maybe there could be a subtitle to help us enter the poem. And yeah, that could. I just don't know what it is. Mark Grinier asks over on Facebook, who is Mr. Moffat? And I don't know. I mean, it's just a character in Doctor Who, I guess. I mean, I assume. I don't know. I mean, I think the only Doctor Who fan in the house is Matthew King. So maybe Matthew can tell us more about who Dr. Moffat is. But let's see. So Jenny Middleton says, I think real Doctor Who fans are fairly obsessive about the show and have a real sense of ownership about it. Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah, there's a lot of like controversy about who the next Doctor Who will be. So Mark Grinier too says the poem clearly depends on one knowing Doctor Who well, which may be a bridge too far. Yeah, you do. I mean, that's just the thing. You have to assume that, people have sort of a general knowledge of the world. And then how far that general knowledge of the world extends is a thing you have to sort of have a sense of, so you know what needs to be explained. And I just think more of this poem needs to be explained, although there's some great lines in it that I enjoy. And yeah, so Lori Zientara says the it throughout that last stanza seems to be made more clear. And yeah, exactly. This whole it, like we just don't know what it is, so we can't connect with it. No pun intended. Oh, Mr. Moffat is the showrunner. Sorry, I got lost. Yeah, that was who fixed that? Oh, it was Liska. Yeah. Thanks. I forgot. I think it's behind my face there. Stephen Moffat. Yeah, that's the showrunner, Stephen Moffat. And so when Matthew referenced when Matthew King referenced it, he was talking about his episodes of the show, I guess. So people who watch even know who the showrunner was for that, for a certain number of episodes. Like that's how into it they are, I guess. Interesting. But still, I think it's just too far. Let's see. Can you hear that? I don't know if you can hear it or not. Well, I'm going to look back and see if you can hear that. My neighbor's using some kind of saw. Anyway, let's move on to the other poet for today. So that's just let us into this poem and make the other poem a hive and play with that. That's what I would do. So those are the two main suggestions, and there aren't a lot of line edits because there's really good lines here. Collian Blackman says you don't necessarily need to be a Who fan to understand the gist, and it's true. Like I get the gist of the show, or the gist of the poem, but you don't feel a gist, and that's the issue. Like one of the things that we say is that poems are little empathy machines, right? And so it's a machine that's trying to make you feel the experience of someone else. That's kind of what a poem is doing. And if you're only getting the gist of it, you're kind of like decoding what it's saying, but you're not experiencing it. And to experience it, you need to just know more of what's going on and feel like you're within the poem. Like the power of a poem is that the speaker becomes you as you're reading it. And if you don't know the circumstances, you can sort of understand what it's about, but you don't feel it. And I think that's the issue here. So and so that's why. So I definitely get the gist that I feel, that this writing that you did as a showrunner of Doctor Who, this show I love, I assume, made me feel left out somehow. And I think we all get that. It's just we don't feel it. So we need to have a little more concrete connection to it in order to feel the feeling behind it. So that's what I would say. But let's move on. It is 9:38 my time. And one more thing. Yeah, Carlian Blackman says the letdown for me is the last two lines. And that's a good thing to point out. So if we had an explanation here, or something like surprising and sort of powerful with a punch at the end, it might be fine. Like the gist with a punch would be good. Yeah, exactly. Too tame, says Carlian. And yeah, like the gist with a punch would be good, or would be good, it'd work. But it was kind of like the fact that we only got the gist and then we didn't get anything more was maybe the problem too. So there's a lot of ways you could sort of approach that. But the ending, you left no space for me, is kind of just a summary of what the poem was trying to convey. I mean, that's why we get the gist. It's kind of like the gist is described here. And it needs to do something more, I think. And too tame is a good way to put it. But I think it could just come to life if we were told a story and actually a little more detail about what was wrong with these episodes. And Cindy Buchanan had said, can you comment on the form, the stanza lengths in particular? That's interesting. They do have this, they start out longer and then shorter and then shorter, so they kind of funnel down. Nothing really stood out for me except, this stanza break here seems almost arbitrary. Sorry, sitting on my foot and it fell asleep. It's right in the middle of a line, and it feels like the line break should be here instead. But what choices like that do is make you pay a little less attention to line and the shape of the poem. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of times the shape and the line length and the stanzas are I kind of feel, and it just, I don't know, it just feels a certain way. But there is a transition here though, because we're describing sort of the show a little bit in a sort of abstract way, and then here's the transition to this next stanza, where we're talking about the feelings and what specifically is like what's my complaint, I guess. It's like this is like the setup, and this is like my complaint, and this is like the resolution it wants to be. And the problem is it's really not a resolution. Like we just get sort of the gist of the complaint, and not the specificity of the complaint. But that's kind of the structure, and I think it works in this poem all right, except this one, I'm not sure why it's here instead of up here. Jimmy Papa says cross out that. But most of all, for all you said. I'm not sure what this most of all for all. I assume that's some kind of quote or some kind of reference to a show. It's strange if not. And if not, I would cross out the for all. But most of all, for all you said, I am feeling. I guess it's for all I am feeling. So this is a continuation of this line. That's what it is. But most of all, for all, or that's what Jimmy Papa suggests anyway. I don't know. But yeah, I do wonder about this line break though. So thanks for pointing that out, Cindy, who that was. Okay, now we got to move on. These are interesting poems though. I'd love to hear a little more about them. Now here's Greg Budig only sent one poem, so it's just Liquid Darkness, which is why I'm doing a little cap at the end. Here's Greg's poem, Liquid Darkness. The darkness has become liquid. It smells of wetness, deep, fragrant, pungent decay. All along the shoreline, inky water gently caresses the sand. Creaking footsteps along the warped and faded dock. Walking slightly on ancient boards, so many summers have passed. Reaching the end, gazing up at the stars. Peeping frogs in the reedy shallows, long-necked grebes. Another word I don't know. Answer calls across the flatness of water. High above, the nighthawk calls and booms on diving sharp wings. The air seems to rise from the water, cool and rich with aquatic perfumes. Lily pads, tadpoles, sunfish, and worms. The sweetness of the earth, the sand, the water. Arching your neck to gaze up upon the endless night, the Milky Way stretches beyond your view. Stare into the heavens with the soul of a child. Look between the stars, and you'll see forever. Interesting. So that was Liquid Darkness. And first of all, Liquid Darkness, I think it's an interesting title. It makes me curious about what's going to come up next. One of those descriptive type short titles. And Cindy Gore says a grebe is a bird. Yeah, that's in context. That's what it seemed to be to me. So thanks for confirming that. I don't know what kind of bird. I don't know how to pronounce it either. A grebe? A grebe? And I don't know what size or what it looks like, but Liquid Darkness. The darkness has become liquid. So I think repeating the Liquid Darkness concept. Maybe I should zoom in a little bit since this is let's see. I had to zoom out for that prose poem. And let me readjust the focus too. Just bear with me 1 second. That's better. Okay. So, so repeating the Liquid Darkness is a pretty weak feel to it. Like nothing is added. If you were adding, like if it was Liquid Darkness, the darkness becomes a viscous liquid or something, where you were adding to that, it would work. But since it's just repeating the same concept, it ends up like muting it. And so what I think I would probably do is take out this, because I like the darkness has become liquid a little better. And I would make that the title, The Darkness Has Become Liquid. I think that's a stronger way to start the poem. It smells of wetness, deep, fragrant, pungent decay. Let me read some comments. So Dick Westheimer says, lots of great images, but no real movement is the issue. So we can think about these while we go through. Let me look over on Facebook. I want to neglect it. Okay. Mike Ritter suggests just calling it Darkness at the title. He also says that it feels a stanza or two too long for me. Yeah, that's a good point too. So let's think about that as we read through. The darkness has become liquid. It smells of wetness, deep, fragrant, pungent decay. All along the shoreline, inky water gently caresses the sand. There's certain words that are just they're not really cliches. They're sort of like melodramatic, and they have the same kind of cliched feel. It's like you're pushing for an emotion. And so there's certain verbs that do that, and caresses is always one of them. Like it's like and so I would pick a different word for that. Just the word choice there, WC, word choice. I used to know all the proofreader's notes, but it's so long I don't anymore. I should re-look those up. Because everybody just proofs on PDF now. But anyway, creaking footsteps along the warped and faded dock. Walking lightly on ancient boards, so many summers have passed. Reaching the end, gazing up at the stars. Again, gazing is not so bad, but it's a similar kind of thing. Where the verb is trying to carry the emotion. Ends up having a melodramatic kind of feel. And gazing up at stars is a bit of a cliche too. So again, word choice here, and that's a bit of a cliche. And the problem with cliches, of course, is you've heard them so much that they don't stimulate new neural connections. I mean, that's really what it is. Like every sounds or mental objects are all these like constellations of neurons. And when you put words together, you're like sort of making new constellations in your brain. And if it's something that's already fired up, it's already like a unit, and we don't get stimulation by that. And that's the problem with cliches. So they don't emote. They don't give us enough feeling. And so that's why you want to avoid them. And so that's a bit of a cliche. It doesn't have the punch or the impact that it would if it was something more original. Mark Grenier also mentioned it feels like it's missing a subject in the first half. The actor is not actually the poem, or in the poem. Yeah, we don't know who the subject is. That's a really good point, too. I kind of assume that the subject is, but it's written in a kind of passive voice where we don't know exactly who. Gina Milton says, what is the darkness, though? The darkness of water, or of a lake at night, or the actual sky? Is it a metaphor for uncertainty? I wasn't completely sure. And I think that, I think that ties into, I think it was Mark Grenier who said the poem is too long. If a poem is short, then you can have sort of a mystery and an ambiguity where we don't know exactly what the darkness is, which darkness we're referring to, and that can kind of be stimulating and interesting if the poem is short. But as the poem goes on too far, it sort of wears out its welcome. And I think that's the sense we're getting here, because that sense of we're not exactly sure what's happening or what the darkness is, or who the speaker is. I think it goes on too far in that state to keep our interest, I guess you could say. So I think you could shorten it up to like 2 stanzas this length. And if the whole poem were condensed to this length, it might work a little better and not be as much of an issue. Peeping frogs in the reedy shallows, long-necked grebes. I really want to look up those. Sorry for looking things up all the time, but I want to know what a grebe is. And we'll give you. Okay. So it looks like the duck type animals here. I'll put it on the screen too. Come on. There you go. So it's those red-eyed duck type things, or grebes. Yeah, I always wondered what those were, so now I learned. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for teaching me, Greg and Cindy. So, peeping frogs in the reedy shallows. So we're definitely in this kind of setting at night in a lake type environment. The flatness of water, which I like too. Long neck grebes answer calls across the flatness of water. That's maybe one of the nicest lines in the poem, the flatness of water. There's something about that I really like. High above the nighthawk calls and booms on diving sharp wings. So we're sort of hearing but not seeing, which is a nice thing, in the darkness of night. The air seems to rise from the water. I like that idea too. I like that. So these are the things I would save and shrink the poem. Cool and rich with aquatic perfumes, lily pads, tadpoles, sunfish, and worms. The sweetness of the earth. Again, the sweetness is that similar thing to caresses, the sand, the water, arching your neck to gaze upon the endless night. The Milky Way stretches beyond your view. Stare into the heavens with the soul of a child. Again, the soul is a cliche. Look between the stars and you'll see forever. So I think that this poem can work if it's condensed. It does. I think it just stretches out too far with no like turn. I think, isn't that what Dick said? Dick Westheimer. Where did that go? Very early on. Lots of great images, but no real movement. Yeah, that's the thing. So since there's no real movement in the poem, it's just sort of describing this one mood. It's like a lyric poem that's sort of, just describing the experience of being at this lake at night. And it doesn't have a real sense of movement. So what we need are either a sense of movement, of something happening, like you want something changed, some kind of state change, mentally or emotionally from the beginning to the end of the poem. And that doesn't really happen. It's just a one note through. And for that to work, it has to be really short, I think, even though in a short poem, it's good to have movement too. But if you condense it down, I think you can get a lot more out of this content. So I think maybe pulling out the best lines and making it just a 2 stanza this length poem could work. Or I think maybe just focusing on like what else, like what. So that a lot of times if you're writing a poem like this, where you're sort of picking up the emotion. We ask a lot of times in poems, like, what is the purpose of this poem? Like what does it do? Like, what does it change? What does it transform? What did I learn? What did you learn while writing? Like, no learning for the reader, or the writer, no learning for the reader, kind of. And so a lot of times we write this, and it's because we felt a certain feeling that we don't quite understand, and so we're starting to describe it. But in the process of describing it, a lot of times, this is a very common structure for a poem, you'll have some kind of revelation or see some kind of avenue of like, oh, this is what I was thinking about then. Or, you know, it reminded me of this or something like that. And then you get the sense of movement where we go back to past memory, or we go to, you know, like a deeper thought about the meaning of something that we're trying to make sense of. Like that kind of, so this kind of description would be like the setup to the poem. And then we get to the meaning, you know, by moving somewhere else to something. And then we, as a reader, get that same meditative process of like being at a night walk around a river, or a lake, and then what we're thinking of and how that created meaning for us, basically. And we get to have that experience as a reader. And so that's what I would probably want to do here, is just push farther into like what my internal thoughts were, and let me, you know, dig deeper into that emotion of that experience to know what's really there, like mine further down into this, other than just, you know, the Milky Way stretches beyond our view, stare into the heavens with the soul of a child, look between the stars and you'll see forever. You know, that's kind of the same thing as we started here. Let's see. Another idea for Jimmy Papa says, why not have one creature in the water do something interesting? Yeah, like observe something new, like something change in the landscape. Or maybe the light comes up and everything changes. You know, some kind of change. Sidney Gore says, I like the poet has the time is passing, I am aging thought that could be enhanced. Lori A. Ziantara says, I like the last two lines. I do like the last two lines too. I should have pointed that out. I think that would be part of, if I were to condense the poem up, it would be kind of like moving through the best lines here. What was it? I thought I like the, I like this part too. So what if we just for a little exercise really quickly, what if we did this? We totally rewrote the poem right now just with the good lines and see how it feels, right? Let's call it The Darkness Has Become Liquid. Okay? So this is the title. The darkness has become liquid. It smells of wetness, deep, fragrant, pungent decay. The air seems to rise from the water. Look between the stars and you'll see forever. I think it needs a little bit more than that. Oh, wait. Yeah, I think it needs maybe bring in a little bit more here. But that works pretty well, actually, if you shrink it down with just the more interesting parts. Vina Kumar says, like Ian. Where's Ian's comment? I think I missed this is Ian McGrath. Santowski says, that's why I don't mind the lack of subject. To make it confusing, whether we're the poet of it or we're part of a second party stalking the poet. Oh, that's an interesting turn on the poem. I hadn't thought of that, really. I thought I was getting more of a sense of the earth, the existence existing without me. You know, I think contemplating, because the poem is contemplating time and our place in the universe and how it's going to end. And that voice to me felt, even though it's kind of, it could be a stronger connection, but it felt to me like almost imagining the universe without me was part of the poem. And that's how that was working. Yeah. Jimmy Pappas with a Robert Frost quote here. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. Excellent. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jimmy. That was Robert Frost. But Ian, again, back to this comment, Ian McGrath, Santowski, it needs to feel more haunting, he would like. And that was what Vina Kumar, I think, was agreeing with. Let's see. Anything else? Oh, he says Mark Grenier says keep the poem. I knew there was one I wanted to keep too. Mark Grenier says keep the stanza with the tadpoles and such. Yeah, I skipped too much there. Let's just do this again, because it almost worked, I thought. Where was that? The peeping frogs and reedy shallows. That one? Or no, this one. Oh yeah, keep all this. Yeah, maybe that's it. Let's try to read it again while keeping this. We'll see. See if this works. I don't know. We'll do. Sharon Fronte suggests this is the title, so let's make this the title. There is more than there's more than liquid in darkness. There is more than liquid in darkness. It smells of wetness, deep, fragrant, pungent decay. The air seems to rise from the water, cool and rich with aquatic perfumes, lily pads, tadpoles, sunfish, and worms, the sweetness of the earth, the sand, the water. Arching your neck to gaze upon the endless night, the Milky Way stretches beyond your view. Looking between the stars, and you'll look between the stars, and you'll see forever. So I think that works a lot better if we just shrink it. I think that did work pretty well. Okay, well, I promised to do one of my own poems, which is a weird thing, but I thought it might be fun and strange. And so this poem, let's see, I printed out a couple. This poem I wasn't satisfied. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. We got to keep going here because I forgot there was another stanza. I didn't think so. I thought that was the actual end. This might change everything. So let's continue. And you'll see forever. It feels like an end, doesn't it? Alone in the liquid darkness, sitting at the end of the old dock, the celestial world above, the world is above you, the aquatic world below, breathing in the solitude, closing your eyes. The loon remembers to call you home. So I think it was fine to not read the ending, except for this. I think this is great. So this is just sort of spinning your wheels. But this works. The loon remembers to call you home. Let's add that to our poem. Let's do that before I go on to the other one. Arching your neck, let's add this too. So here, let's do this one more time. One last time. The darkness has become liquid. It smells of wetness, deep and fragrant, pungent decay. The air seems to rise from the water, cool and rich with aquatic perfumes, lily pads, tadpoles, sunfish, and worms, the sweetness of the earth, the sand, the water. Arching your neck to gaze upon the endless night, the Milky Way stretches beyond your view. Look between the stars and you'll see forever. The loon remembers to call you home. So that's very nice, actually. Yeah, that kind of caps it off. So we just have a lot of stuff we don't need in this poem. And if you strip it down, I think it works pretty well. And that is a better last line than this, even though really these things here, we get back to the liquid darkness again. Nothing is really added. It's just kind of repeating the same stuff over and over again. So that's completely useless, really. But the loon remembers to call you home is very nice. So sorry, Greg. I'm sure as Greg, if he was watching this live or later, he was probably pulling his hair out, being like, "You forgot the last stanza." I'm sorry about that. I thought it was the end. Peter O'Donoghue says, "I have a loon calling me home most nights." Yeah. Nathan Horowitz points out Lily should be Lily. With two L's, should be one L. Just to point that out. Okay. Ian McGrath Santowski says that they're better a word than remembers. One that has a bigger punch. Where was the remember? I can't find it. Oh, the loon remembers to call you home. That was the very last line. I don't know. I kind of like the remember. Yeah, we all love the loon. Yeah. Jimmy Papa suggests Desert Places. Is the title, I assume. Yeah. Yeah, so we'd all do like the loon line too. So I think there's plenty of lines actually. I think it worked in that shrunken version. There's enough there. So I would just shrink it down to that. And then always as you're writing poems, just be aware of all the clutter that you don't need. It looks like one of those, it's a very common thing to sort of like overwrite and like write more substance than you need and then strip down. So just in general, it's part of the process. Like write a poem, like don't hesitate to write a poem this length, but then get out your scissors and just snip, snip, snip and get up to the good stuff. Oh, that was the Frost poem, says Jimmy Pappas. Thanks, Jimmy. That makes sense. The Frost poem that Jimmy quoted. I see. Okay. Well, let's do this really quick then, just because I promised. I didn't think 3 poems would take up the whole hour, but they did. So this is a poem. I printed out a couple that I want to like but don't, and these are just from the prompt poems. But this is one a long time ago. I can't remember what the prompt was. It's like 2 years ago probably. And I feel more for this poem than is in the poem. But I won't say any more about it. I'll just read it. And you can pretend, I'll pretend. And the nice thing about me is that I have a terrible memory. Like I didn't remember that was a 2-page poem until I turned the page. So I can't even remember this poem. So it's definitely fresh, like it's someone else's poem, which is always fun. It's been 2 years. Christina's Bench. Every autumn evening, the honey light lifts itself reluctantly from the seat of the bench, the pine planks of the backrest making a blade of shadow, this accidental sundial sweeping away the day, remaining slant of light like a golden sheet pulled taut by gentle hands that aren't there but must be, hidden in the rabbit brush, or in a stand of ponderosa down the ridge, loving hands cradling invisible wires, a magician's assistant, well hidden off stage, a wizard with a wand, any kind of magic to explain the otherwise stillness. The weight of the air as time is measured in wood grain, line by darker line letting go, sapwood over heartwood over sapwood, until only the bronze plaque on the arm is illuminated. First star of the night, a single name, 2 dates too close together, the patina on the armrest too smooth. Yeah, so there's, I don't know. This is a poem about one of the places we hike, and it's like off the trail, so you don't even see that it's there really. But then you see the glint of the sun off this placard, so you kind of know there's something there. And that's the first time we realized it was there. And so you kind of walk through a really rough trail that's very narrow to this other little clearing on a ledge, and there's this bench there which is in memoriam of Christina, who and I looked it up and tried to figure it out later. It was somebody who locally about maybe 20 years ago in our town who died in a car accident as a teenager, like driving home from high school, and she loved that trail, and I guess going off on that ledge, so her parents had put a memorial bench there. And it's just really touching to me that it's there all the time. I don't know. There's something about it, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. So I wanted to write in a poem. I don't think the poem captures it. So let's look at line by line. Christine's, I think it spins its wheels a lot too far in the beginning. I feel like it's sort of picking up at the end. And I think everyone's too scared to say anything bad about my poem. You feel free. Let's see. And Potter Downey says, anyone with submissions isn't going to go hard on this. And then he says, love it, best poem ever. Yeah, so you can, too much spinning, Joe Barker. Joe Barker can be honest. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, that's the thing. I gotta cut the beginning and get to the end. So every autumn evening, the honey light is kind of, blah, to lifts itself reluctantly from the seat of the bench. I gotta find a better word for honey light. The pine planks of the backrest making a blade of shadow, this accidental sundial. I think this is where it goes wrong. This accidental sundial. I think this is just too much. So probably cut some here and then get to the, I don't know what. So I was thinking of this, the way that the sun sort of moves across that, but it doesn't really come out very well. Joe Barker wants more clarity on what happened. Yeah. Katie Mushman says, or Katie Dozier Mushman says, maybe the wizard takes a little too far. Like once I go Harry Potter, hard to make myself sit on the bench. Yeah, good point. So Yeah, so the accidental sundial sweeping away the day, remaining slant of light like a golden sheet pulled taut by gentle hands that aren't there. I sort of wanted, I was thinking too, a way that the sun moves almost like the shadow of the mountain moves across, almost like the bench is being tucked in at night, every night. Pulled taut by gentle hands that aren't there, but must be hidden in the rabbit brush or in a stand of ponderosa down the ridge. Yeah, this goes on way too far. So even if we cut this, we can, we got to cut there at least. Cradling invisible wires, the magician's assistant. Yeah, this is just, cut that. Well hidden off stage, a wizard with a wand, any kind of magic to explain the otherwise stillness. Oh, God. Yeah, see? The weight of the air is time, as time is measured in wood grain. I think we could cut down to here, maybe. Just get rid of that. Line by darker line, letting go, sapwood over heartwood over sapwood until only the bronze plaque of the arm is illuminated, first star of the night. A single name, 2 dates too close together. The patina on the armrest too smooth. Yeah, I think I really just need. This wants to be a really short poem, I think. Potter says, have 2 whiskeys and listen to this song and see if it helps. Local boy in the photograph. Interesting. I can't play it now because of copyright strikes, but I'll listen to it later, Potter. The question says the beginning sustains the puzzle mystery too long. It does. And Vinu Kumar says, accidental sundial sweeping away the day gives us everything we need. It's a beautiful line. And Jimmy Papa says, I wonder if you could write a haiku. So this is very similar to, I think, the last poem, Greg Budig's poem, where it's just too long. Like, it doesn't need to be this long, right? So, and it's a little too melodramatic, too. Very similar to the last poem, actually. So there you go. Anybody, everybody can be critiqued. Christina's Bench, every autumn evening. It just needs a different word for honey, but something light. Lifts itself reluctantly from the seat of the bench. The pine planks of the backrest making a blade of shadow. This accidental sundial sweeping away the day. Sapwood over heartwood over sapwood until only the bronze plaque of the arm is illuminated. First star of the night, a single name, 2 dates. Yeah, I think it needs more. Maybe Joe Barker's right that it needs more of a description of what it was. I was trying to leave it, I thought that these 2 dates too close together line was sort of powerful enough to pull the whole story of the poem, like leaving it abstract enough so you don't really know what's happening, but know enough about what did so you can sort of make the leap yourself. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe that needs to be explained, like Joe said too. And then the patina on the armrest, too smooth. I was going for the fact that people sit there. The parents probably sit there very, very often, which I think is the heartbreaking part of it to me. Yeah. So maybe just a tiny, tiny poem. Maybe a Mike White type poem is what it needs to be. It's too much description that spins its wheels and doesn't go anywhere. But I do like the ending still, kind of. And so Vina does too. Yeah, so maybe really cut it even more. Maybe just like 8 lines. That's what I'll do in a rewrite. And when I rewrite it, if I rewrite it, I'll share it again really quickly at the end of next week or something. But that is it. So thanks for working through a poem for me. I think we figure out where to go at least with this poem, which is something. So thanks for that. And that is the show for today. I don't know if that was weird doing my own poem. It's fun to look at your own poem and then have it be so much crap in it. It's a nice. It's nice to see that how easy it is to see that when you put the poem away for 2 years. Do you want to see? Cindy Gore wants me to read Einstein's Train. Well, not critique it. We could read it. This is on a critique of the week too. I just think I didn't know where I was going with it. Do you want me to read it? I guess I'll read it just for Cindy, and then we'll go. Take 1 minute to read it. Einstein's Train. He's placed you inexplicably on the roof. And the Einstein's Train is his concept of, it's how he visualized the time dilation. Einstein's Train. He's placed you inexplicably on the roof when the comfort of the dinner car would do, and it's empty now, but for the waiters waiting over the empty tables, You're tied to the center of the train's mass for safety's sake, all of it speeding now at half the speed of light, the trees in the distance stretching to hedgerows, the sun a blunt dagger in the sky, the world you left red shifting, the future fading past violet, and there's Einstein at the station leaning forward on his little bench, when the bulb in your lips flashes, the photons flowing out in every direction to the edges of the train's once dark roof. Simultaneously, but not in sync, and Einstein leaps through the wild silhouette of his hair in excitement. He seems to be shouting, but all of the sound, and whatever it means, remains lost in the air. So, and that is one of those poems I didn't know where I was going with it, and I was just kind of playing and riffing, and then it kind of didn't end up going anywhere that I made the connection. Like, it didn't make that leap that you want, where you're surprising yourself. I think that was what I didn't reread this before either poem. I was looking through poems that I like, that should be good, and I don't like it, so we'll see what it is. And this one, it has momentum and things are happening, but it doesn't make that leap into something that surprised myself. I guess the ending, I don't know. So Ian McGrath Santowski likes the ending, and it I don't know. I just don't know what's wrong with this poem, but I'm not really happy with it, so I don't know. I'll think about it more. But that was just, I don't want to take up anybody's time. So Cindy Buchanan likes the ending too. There's something there. I think that that's why I pulled it out. I don't know. I'm not satisfied with it, but I don't know what to do. And once I enter a poem, I don't know how to get back into it either. Like with the other poem, I could totally rewrite it using just a couple lines as springboards and then make it like a sonnet or something, and see how that length works, or make it some kind of, I don't know, like play with the form or something I'll do with the other poem. With this, I don't know. Cindy Gore likes it, so maybe it's just not as bad as I think. Maybe I'm just too hard on this poem. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I'll think about this poem more. Could it be that it takes too long to get here? Or is it maybe the story of Einstein's sort of daydream isn't clear enough, the implications of it? Because reading it again, I don't get that. Yeah, I don't know. There was something there, and I just didn't. I don't know. I couldn't sink my teeth into it. Ian McGrath Santowski says the use of whatever is what captures the meaningless of words. Yeah. And maybe that's it too. Maybe that's what the thing is the how difficult it is to explain things. I think maybe that's part of it. Because what Einstein really did was imagine things and then find a way to talk about them that we didn't have before. But anyway, maybe I'll play with that a little bit more too. I'm not sure where to go with it though still. Here, Mark Grenier says the Einstein poem is close. I think the ending doesn't do anything with the red shifting and time dilation in the middle. And it should, I think. That's a good point. Yeah. Maybe that's it. Maybe I need to bring that back a little bit. Okay, well, we'll think about that one. But thanks, everybody, for that little bit of critique of my own. I think actually it's one of the things I want to do is see how helpful it was to, one of the things, it's almost like, talking to your spouse about something and they see through all your bullshit, having to read your poem in a critique setting, like, makes you see what you couldn't see because you're too close to it. Like, it gives a certain perspective, and you can't deny its like flaws anymore. So it is useful. I kind of want to see how useful it was. And it is, so I'm glad. Yeah. Well, anyway, okay, that is it for the critique of the week today. Thanks, everybody. That was kind of fun. And some good poems too, besides mine. Now this week's guest in the Rattlecast coming up is going to be Raquel Franco, and that is her newest book. I think I had the wrong book up because I couldn't tell which one was her newest. This is When the Bee Stings right here, and Raquel is it's going to be really interesting talking to her because she was in our Instagram Poets issue, and she self-publishes these books. I think she's got 3 or 4 of them. And it's just a totally different mode of attacking how you get your poems out to the world. And she has good poems. She has a poem in the spring issue of Rattle And so I really want to talk about this style of publishing and what the opportunities here are. And she just does a great job of that, of using her Instagram and Twitter accounts and making beautiful books. I mean, if you can see, this is just a gorgeous book. And really well done. And so excited to talk to Raquel about her books and what she's doing with publishing in addition to the books themselves. So that is going to be Rattlecast number 154, Monday, August 8th. The regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And the prompt for the week was to, write a obituary about an inanimate object or concept. So write an obituary for something that's like going away or something, or explore that as much as you can. Stretch that as far as you can make it. That is the prompt for this week, though. Write an obituary poem about an abstract concept or object, similar to what Heather Altfelt was doing, last week's guest, in her book Postmortem. That is the prompt for this week. That is the show, Rattlecast number 154. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and I will talk to you later.